This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel from merino base layers to technical outerwear for every hunt. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. Okay, everybody, I'm very, very excited to announce that I am seated here with the writer and film director, Werner Herzog, who's made over 60 films and documentaries, including many I'm sure you heard of and a bunch of them that you better have seen. Little Dieter Needs to Fly, Rescue Dawn, the famous, in my circle of people, Grizzly Man, Happy People, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which I believe is your only film that I managed to catch when it released in a theater in New York. Cave of Forgotten Dreams. His films deal with extremes, with struggle, with absurdity, with madness, with happiness, and many are fused, in my opinion, with a very unique perspective on nature and the natural world. If you read about Herzog, you'll often find writers describing his work as man against nature, man versus nature. We'll find out if he describes it that way. I'm guessing he doesn't, as I believe that description would imply that nature is aware of man as an adversary. Mr. Herzog, a couple of your own quotes. The universe is monstrously indifferent to the presence of man. You also once said, I believe the common denominator of the universe is not harmony, but chaos, hostility, and murder. Now, many documentarians who deal with the natural world, I find personally, seem to reflect the relationship with nature. Sometimes feels to me as though it's taught, as though it's something they picked up or learned from their peers. It's oftentimes political. But our guest here today, I feel that the things he has to say about the natural world and the way that the natural world plays into his movies is wholly original, influenced me immensely, not just as a writer or a TV person, but as a human. I'd say for me on par with Cormac McCarthy, because both have these immense bodies of work that interplay together as something that is not schizophrenic, meaning they carry this sort of intellectual trademark. And the last little bit of introduction I'll say, and this is a very inside joke, when I'm arguing with production people, which I do in my line of work, I've a lot of times dealt with camera guys, producers that want to catch the entirety of a process. And if they can't catch the entirety of a process, they don't want to use it. And I will say to them in shorthand, I will take a line from Happy People, and I will say, the nets were set the night before, because there's a scene in Happy People which chronicles the lives of Siberian fur trappers and subsistence hunters. And there's a scene that opens where they're just checking a net. And my camera guys would have been like, well, we can't use that. We never saw you set the net. To which I will refer them to Happy People, and I will say to them, the nets were set the night before. And that's it. Go on with your movie. Go on with your movie. I want to start our conversation to talk a little bit about your childhood, which I was like I said, my avenue to you and your work has just been your movies. I've been a fan of your movies for such a long time. And it wasn't until I read your new book, which I haven't finished yet, but started your new book. Tell me, it's Every Man for Himself and God Against All. Your life story.
Memoirs, yeah.
I didn't realize the extent of the poverty that you grew up in.
Well, it's easy to imagine when you grow up at the end of the Second World War and then mostly post-war time. And you have to imagine a scenario where everybody here in the country, in the United States, is very well aware how ground zero looked at 9/11, after 9/11. Complete devastation, but a very limited area on the island of Manhattan. But you have to imagine a whole country, Germany, where 720 or so cities were wiped out, the entire cities. Some of them not as completely, for example, Munich, where I was born, was only 85% flattened and destroyed. And it was one of these Allied bombing raids, carpet bombings, that hit our neighborhood, and everything around destroyed. And I was only 2 weeks old, 14 days old. And where we lived was partially destroyed. And my mother picks me up from my cradle, which was covered with about a foot high shards of glass and bricks and debris. But I was unhurt. And of course, you get, when you're a mother, you naturally are scared. And she fled with my older brother and me into the remotest mountain valley in the Alps in Bavaria.
And your dad had split out on you guys? Your dad wasn't in the picture at this time.
He wasn't in the picture. Well, he was in the war.
Yeah.
When I was born. I was born in 1942. The war was over 1945. And when he came back, he very soon divorced. And my mother was a single mother and had to raise. Then she had another boy, my younger brother. So she had to raise 3 children, and there was never enough to eat. So what I remember very well is starving.
Yeah, you tell a story
And,
of a lesson you learned about nagging your mother, of you and your brother nagging your mother about how hungry you were, and her saying, "If I could take it from my ribs, I would take it from my ribs."
Yeah, but I can't.
But I can't.
And you shut up, boys, and we. Of course, that was a serious moment, and it's engraved in my memories. So, and of course, it was not only food. We had literally nothing. For example, we didn't have mattresses. My mother stuffed burlap sacks with hay that she made from fern. But when you cut the stem of a fern, it hardens when it dries. It hardens like the tip of a sharp
Yeah, you're saying she would
pencil.
cut it with a scythe. Yeah.
Yes, she cut it with a scythe, and you would feel it at night when you shifted around. All of a sudden, you were on 2 pencils that were stinging you, and fern also hardens. It's not like hay, more fluffy. It becomes almost like cement, and you have these little dents. And I had to navigate the dents in my mattress. So my entire childhood, I never had a flat surface on which I slept. And we had no running water. You had to go to the well with a bucket and bring in the water, and no sewage system, no heating, a toilet, but an outhouse, which was adjacent to this little house where we grew up.
And you talk about eating someone killing a crow or a raven.
Yeah, yes.
And you being surprised by the seeing fat.
Yeah,
fat on a soup broth and being surprised by the fat.
I've never had seen anything like this, and until today, this means wealth. Or, for example, the first time I ate a fried egg, or an egg in my life, I must have been about 10 or 11. And it was like an incredible feast. Never ate a chicken for me when I see, and even, you see, even when you drive by the fast food Kentucky Fried Chicken, finger-licking good. And it makes an impression on me, because chicken means the definitive feast.
You mentioned another detail of your mother getting a loaf of bread with food coupons or however you
Yeah,
describe
yeah.
them, but then scoring the bread
Right.
in 7 segments
For each day.
so that she would partition the bread
Yeah.
as the week's ration of bread.
Yeah.
And in that passage, you mentioned, you don't elaborate on it, and I was looking for you to elaborate on it, that you said that you have no tolerance for the culture of complaint.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it, but explain that to me.
Well, I cannot make it the norm how I grew up. It was an unusual childhood because it was in the aftermath of a catastrophic war that Germany actually had started, and the catastrophe came from our own people, from our society, from our leader Adolf Hitler, and it was really so bad that we knew now what we got. And each one of us had a thin slice of bread per day. And the kind of grooves that my mother carved into the loaf of bread, we knew this was the only thing we have. And of course, she would also make some food from dandelion leaves and from syrup from some trees, and replacing sugar, which we didn't have. So when I see in our kind of societies, Western, highly technical societies, where a lot of food is being thrown away. In the United States, I think more than 40% of food, and I find it outrageous, and I never say anything because it was my experience, and I know the value of food. I know there's something which has to be honored, and it, in a way, it pains me when I see so much food being thrown away. Because of my experience, it was unusual. But I never speak out loud. But
You don't chastise people for wasting
no,
food.
for God's sake, I would be the last one. That's not in my nature. Because you have to determine how you live, and whether you live a life of consumerism or whether you are more cautious with wasting resources that we have. And I think when you are in other societies, hunters and gatherers, they are more careful and cautious. There's no doubt in my heart, because that's how we were organized as biological creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can I say, I see people in a restaurant complaining to the waiter that this wasn't any good and give it back to the kitchen. And so I don't like this complaint. And it's not only about food, it's about whatever. Our lives are so difficult, and gasoline has become so expensive, and all these things. Yes, deal with it in the right way, but don't complain too much.
I got 2 questions stacked up in my head, and one I was going to ask you, and one I thought about asking you and decided not to, but now I am going to ask you because you alluded to it.
Yeah.
My father fought in World War II.
Yeah.
Served in the European theater, and maintained, I don't want to say we joke about it now, but maintained a deep suspicion of Germany through to the end.
Rightly so.
0 for Japan.
I have
He didn't fight the Japanese. Yeah,
no
0 for
problems
Japan.
with your father.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I'm not getting at that. But what was it's kind of like outside of a subject matter I'm like anything but or that I'm an expert on. But what was how did you perceive when you're thrust in at a young age, when you're thrust into such like this devastating situation, and so many of your countrymen are being killed, your cities are being destroyed, you're starving. What is your perception of Germany? Is it gone?
No, of course not. I'm still a German citizen.
No, I'm saying at that
yes,
time,
at
how
the
are
time.
people feeling about, are they, is this all happening to them? Is it a thing they created? Like,
Well, there
what
was
was
a
your
different-
mom's perception, I
There
guess?
was a different response. Some of them you still, until today, you have deniers. You even have Holocaust deniers,
Yeah.
which is the most absurd of all because it's hundreds, thousands of times documented. Survivors are there. The bodies were found. A crime of proportions that the world has never seen in any country throughout the entire history of the human race. Nothing like that has ever happened. So of course, you have to ask yourself what went wrong, what made Germany lapse into a culture from a very solid culture, philosophy, mathematics, writers, composers, you just name it. How does it lapse into a culture of barbarism within very few years? So of course that gave me to think, and of course it has importance. Always something is resonating from that in my entire existence.
But
And
where did the blame?
important, yeah.
What was your sense of or perhaps this would be a question that you'd have to answer on your mother's behalf. What was the sense of blame? Was the blame the Allies? Was the blame on England,
No.
the U.S. for doing this?
No,
Or-
I think the overwhelming part of the population knew it was self-inflicted.
Mhm.
And you have to also see one strange thing when you speak about Germany as a child, and even when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I didn't know that Germany existed, that there was such a thing like Germany. For me, this valley in the mountains, that was the world. And beyond that, yes, there was Austria because the border was closed, and some young men, the bold young men, would secretly smuggle goods from Austria into Germany, and some of them were my childhood heroes. But I did not notice, I had no concept that there were countries. I mean, Austria, Tyrol, yes, our valley, and something beyond it. And my very first memory that I have must have been 2.5 years, Allied bombers hit the city of Rosenheim. And my mother took us out of bed, and it was in the middle of the night, ice cold, must have been March or April, still snow out there. And very far in the distance, at the end of the valley, you could see the entire sky not burning, not flickering, or so a very slow pulsing of red and orange. And she said, boys, the city of Rosenheim is burning. But the city of Rosenheim is 40 miles away, that far, an entire city burning. And for me, it was a very essential moment because I apparently started to understand there's a world out there, not our valley alone, and not the waterfall in the ravine behind the home. That there was something out there that was different and dangerous and burning, and there was such a thing like a war. Of course, we saw American soldiers coming in, but they were very genial with kids and befriended the kids. And for the first time, I saw an African American, and I was completely enthralled. A huge, big guy with a big resonant voice. A little bit, I always compare him to Shaquille O'Neal. A very, very big man with a very big heart and a wonderful voice, a soft, wonderful voice. That was for us. We only knew it from fairy tales, the Moors.
Oh, yeah.
The Moors, and there was a Moor, and I was completely fascinated. And I knew, yes, it's true. There's some foreign countries like Africa, and you have the Moors, and there are Moors in America. How about that?
That particular city that burned, that the story you tell in your book demonstrates a little bit of a different perspective on collateral damage than you see in warfare today. Where in warfare today, there's so much public emphasis on not, targeting civilians, where you're hitting.
Yeah.
And you telling that story that Allied bombers are actually trying to get to a different place entirely.
Yes. And
they can't get over the mountains because of weather, and they just find a town.
Yeah, sure. And
they find a town and level it.
They want to return to the base empty.
Yeah.
And it was probably the reason why the city of Rosenheim was destroyed in a gigantic conflagration. So, but only later, and let me add up one thing with a sky in the distance, pulsing in flames. It made me curious, and I knew there was something out I wanted to understand. I wanted to learn. So, and that's why I moved out, and that's why I have been so much around. And it's very strange because people ask me, why can you say that you are a writer? And I have always maintained that my writing will live longer. My prose, my poetry will probably live longer than my films. How do you somehow compare that? Or is there a conflict between filmmaking? No, it is not, and I have a simple, almost like a formula. Films are my voyage, and writing is home.
Oh, yeah. That's your films are your forays out into the world.
Yeah, writing is home.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That brings me to a question that I was hoping to share with you, to ask you about. Like I said, I was unfamiliar with the level of poverty that you grew up in.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Oh, no. This isn't coming from a place of pity.
No. I don't want to be commiserated. For children, it was a wonderful, incredible time. And we had to take responsibility. We had to go out foraging. We were the ones who would catch trout in the creek. But since we had no fishing gear, we caught them by hand. You can catch trout.
Yeah, you explain that method in your book. It's like a slow movement and then a quick grab.
They flee under stones. They take refuge under tufts of grass overhanging into the creek, into the water. And you know where they are hiding, and you have to be very, very patient and cautious, and you actually can catch them with your own hands. People think I'm making it up,
I
but
don't. I don't.
You have probably done it yourself.
When so considering that childhood, it made me rethink your film Happy People.
Yes.
And within the last day or two, maybe it was even our producer, Corinne, or Phil, the engineer here, I mentioned Happy People, and he said, you mean the people, I remember who said, they said, you mean the people that seem miserable, but they're happy? And I wondered about that, or some joke like that, meaning, I just remember watching Happy People, which is about Siberian hunter-gatherers and fur trappers, and just seeing someone carpeted in mosquitoes. I mean, it was like they had apparel, like their apparel was made of mosquitoes, but just working away. And
without complaint.
Yeah, without complaint.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought about, because in Happy People, there's no person meditates on the meaning of happiness. No person says, well, in spite of appearances, I'm quite happy. There's it's just the title is Happy People, but then it's this portrait of people, and a viewer would not watch Happy People, and if someone said, what did you watch a movie about? They wouldn't say, I watched a movie about these very happy people.
Yes, and not only happy, they are dignified. They lead a life full of dignity, of awe, of wonder, of nature, of being out there, a life that has a lot of deep meaning. I envy them. And when I see them on a screen, there's only one wish, oh man, I would like to join them.
Oh, yeah. I can see that feeling.
Yeah. And the fact that they do not have, let's say, electricity and air condition and mosquito repellent, and you just name it. Just their dogs, their hands, their intelligence, and rifle and fishing gear. And they live an incredible life, so fulfilled, so wonderful. And whoever sees this, and I believe those who actually have ever hunted, they will immediately understand, instantly.
Yeah.
I envy them.
Yeah. When you made I had watched your films, but became interested in your thinking about nature and your thinking about animals. Like I had seen Aguirre, Wrath of God. I'd seen Fitzcarraldo, which are great stories. Really enjoyable films, and it sparked a curiosity in me about how you view things. But then the Timothy Treadwell incident happened. So just to give listeners a quick run through, Timothy Treadwell, I think he's born in the late 50s, if I'm not mistaken. He had been wanted to be an actor. He had actually was in competition with Woody Harrelson for the.
Well, that's what he claims. We do not know exactly.
So that's not known for sure. Yeah.
We can look at him and say he was a failed actor.
And
then deeply into alcohol and drugs. So he was struggling to get out of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, that brought him to Alaska, because out there in nature and with a task that he put on his own shoulders to protect the bears against the bad guys, the poachers.
Mm-hmm.
Poachers hardly exist at all, but that was his fiction under which he lived. And he got himself straightened out in a way. And when you look at him, of course, he has moments where he unravels and where he's completely falling apart, but moments of deep insight, moments of poetry, moments of beauty, what he's doing, what he's seeing, how he describes it, how he depicts things. A wonderful, wonderful kind of life out there in the wilderness.
In my world at that time, this is what I was getting at about when I became interested in how you viewed these, because in my world at that time, meaning fairly serious outdoorsman, strong Alaska connections, there was just people reveled in his death. And it was just how stupid, he should have known, what a nut job. And then I would find myself, before you did your film, I would find myself joking like, that man would outcamp any person I know. And I would say, I would love to see you go spend 13 summers in an alder thicket on the Alaska Peninsula.
And like, with a very dense population of grizzly bears.
Go do that and then come tell me how stupid the guy was. You might not agree with what he stood for. You might not agree with his practices, but like, there was a tenacity and a sort of outdoor expertise. And then your film came out, and it's like, I had joked about it and commented on it, but your film came out and was so, it was so like open-hearted and fair,
and the
like,
respect for him, and
but like the proper condemnation, the proper respect, but just painted a wholly different picture than what you got from the media, which was this just nothing but a nut job.
Yeah, that was a small part of the media, but of course it's also unusual that the filmmaker has an ongoing argument with his protagonist, who was already killed by a bear 10 months before.
Was that all it was, 10 months when you were working on that? So you got to it right away.
Yeah. I never met him. Of course, he was dead when I heard about, and his girlfriend was also killed and eaten by the same bear. So it doesn't matter that I differ from him, and I differ from him in some basic. I say it with caution in quotes. Basic philosophy. He was more a little bit towards New Age, which I can't stand. This pseudo-philosophical babble, but behind this new agey aspect of wild nature, there's something which I call the Disney-ization of wild nature. For Treadwell, the bears were wonderful, big-hearted, fluffy creatures, and you had to approach them and, if possible, even hug them and sing a song to them and tell them how much you love them. And one of the native Alutiiq people on Kodiak Island, he says on camera, there was something wrong. You do not love the bear. You should rather respect the bear and respect the territory. Keep your distance. Allow the bear its territory, but you do not need to love it. You do not love the bear. Respect it. And that this kind of philosophy that went awry into Walt Disney fluffiness somehow unfortunately cost him his life and the life of his girlfriend and the life of 2 grizzly bears who were shot by park rangers who found them still feasting on the bodies.
How did you first hear that story and jump into that project?
Well, it was unusual because I do things that come with vehemence at me, and it was one of those cases where something stumbles into me. I was at a producer's place down in the valley, a few miles away from here, only where I'm sitting, and he had helped me very generously with finding partners for a film. And I paid him a visit just to thank him, and at the end we were sitting at a glass table full of messy papers and FedExes and half-eaten lunch salad and so. And when I got up, I got up and I couldn't find my car keys. I swear to God, I was searching for my car keys, not for a movie. So I had placed it on the table. And I look at the car key, and he sees it and thinks I spotted some paper and shoves an article to me. It was one of the first magazine articles about Timothy Treadwell. And he says, read this, we are doing a very interesting project. So I took it and my keys went home. And I was sitting literally here, just at this table next behind you. I was sitting there and normally I don't read these things. I read it. And you know what? I was instantly back in my car and I rushed down and I said, this is big. This is so big, I cannot believe it. And I said, how far are you in preparations? We have to start in 8 days at the latest. There's hardly any time left. We have to travel. And then I asked, who is directing the film? And he said, listen very, very carefully. He said, I'm kind of directing the film. Kind of directing this film. So I sensed he didn't know exactly what he was doing or how to tackle this. And I looked at him and I said, no, I will direct this movie now. I was kind of surprised and shook my hand and said it would be an honor. And I made the film. So,
when in that movie,
but it was, you see, what was clear, this is big. And as a storyteller, as somebody who makes movies and also a writer, I know this is big.
In that, there's the famous scene where you I believe you're at a kitchen table and you put on the headphones and you're able to hear the recording.
Yeah.
There was a camera rolling for 6 months during the attack, and you hear the recording, and your comment does more to convey the horror of what you're hearing than perhaps hearing it would, because you say that
I barely comment.
Well, you say no one.
Yeah.
You say no one should listen to this.
Yes.
Never let anyone listen to this.
And my comment is even stronger because the camera is over my shoulder. You see only the back or the side of my head. And the camera is on the woman who owns the tape, who has worked with Treadwell for long, long years. And she tries to read from my face what I'm hearing, how horrible it is. And she starts to cry. She can tell from my face that there's something terrible that I'm hearing.
And she had not heard it.
No, and I said to her, please don't ever listen to it. And I said to her something very stupid, please, you should rather destroy it, which she didn't do. She was smart enough not to do it, but she separated her from the tape and put it in a bank vault. So it's locked away from her. And you see, as a filmmaker, you do not have to put everything out, even though it was there and it would have sensationalized the film. Everybody wanted me to include it into the film. The distributor, the TV network, the production company, everyone said, and I said, I will address the tape because it is known, it's out there. But I will make the decision. And after I'd heard it, I said, it's not going to be in my film. You have to take me out, but I will resist to be taken out. I'm a formidable opponent. Be careful, I will fight. And this is not going to be in my film, because there's such a thing as a dignity and the privacy of an individual's death. And you do not publicize it and sensationalize it, period. So, and they understood. And another example, because I saw the film 2 days ago, for the first time in many years, The White Diamond. It's about a jungle airship, some sort of...
I've seen that movie,
Yeah, that maneuvers in the canopies of trees. And nearby...
It's in Guyana, right?
In Guyana, yeah. And there's a waterfall, the Kaieteur waterfall, 3 times the height of Niagara Fall. Not as much volume of water, but a formidable waterfall.
I've been to that waterfall.
You have been?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you have seen the swifts. There are swifts that come down.
Underneath and beneath.
They come down from the sky. They form vortices, a vortex, and then they shoot down, and with this speed that is higher than free fall, They swish behind the waterfall, behind this massive curtain. There's a gap, and they have 1.5 million or 1 million nests behind there. And I was curious, and we lowered a strong guy in the team, actually also a mountain climber, lowered him on a rope with a camera, and he filmed it. And a few days later, a local tribal leader tells us, you filmed that, yeah, but for us in our culture, there's a secret, because there are gigantic snakes, and they keep the secrets of our people. They keep the treasures of our hearts, and nobody of us would ever look behind the waterfalls. And very politely he says, could it be that you just saw it, but you don't publish it? And that very moment I said, it's not going to be published.
Yeah. That little bit of, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess there's something bigger than
filmmaking.
There's something bigger that you have to live with than the films that you put out for people to enjoy.
There are bigger things than filmmaking, let's face it.
You've done 3 films about people. You've done 3 films about people who were shot down or survived air crashes.
Yeah.
And land in the jungle. So you did one about a woman, the sole survivor from a air crash in Peru, was it?
Yes, in the jungle of Peru.
Yeah, a plane was struck by lightning. She was buckled into a row of seats.
Yes.
Which maybe acted as a parachute. It's just inexplicable. But she and a number of other passengers fell 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
Hit the forest canopy.
More than 10,000. I think it came down, but we can only estimate from 5,000 meters altitude, 16,000 feet. And she survived it.
Yes.
And probably it's mysterious. I mean, there was a violent thunderstorm at the eastern slopes of the Andes, and this updraft may even take you higher up into the sky. It could happen. And she was on a window seat, on the 3 seats. Her mother in the middle seat, an obese Peruvian man immediately is falling asleep, snoring on the aisle seat. And she has fragments of memory that she sailed on, strapped to the row of seats. And she complained, she said, people say I left the plane. No, the plane left me.
She kept going, yeah.
And you know, I was always fascinated by her story because I was booked on that very flight.
Yeah.
And a huge chain of coincidences took me out of this. And also something, as he had the seat, the empty seats next to her, it's what we call the maple seed effect. If you have the seed of a maple, you have the seed and then something like a wing, and it spirals.
Yeah.
It keeps spiraling down to the ground. So that may have saved her. There were actually probably other survivors, because some people were found sitting and leaning against a tree. So they must have crawled there, and it was a very eerie scene when the first rescue people arrived. They had actually given up the search after 10 days or 11 days. It was hopeless because the plane had disintegrated in thousands of fragments and rained down. So there was no impact site that you could spot from the air. And suitcases had opened in mid-air because it was Christmas Eve day, and there were presents dangling in the jungle trees, and also human intestines as decoration. I mean, it's an eerie, must have been a very, very surreal sight.
But she survives.
She survived because she knew about the jungle. She had grown up with her parents at an biological station in the jungle. And she understood what was going on around.
Yeah, and then you did 2 films you did a fictional film and a documentary about an individual, a U.S. airman, I think a Navy pilot. And he was shot down over Laos during the Vietnam War, survives all these just horrific conditions. When he finally gets rescued, the helicopter pilots that rescued him can't tell what he is. They don't know who he is. They find a half-eaten snake in his backpack, and it's this airman that had been missing for I don't know how many months.
Half a year, yes.
Yeah. And thinking about those, and then thinking about when you were doing when there's a documentary made about you making Fitzcarraldo. And I remember you saying, talking about the birds in the jungle. And you said the birds here, I'm paraphrasing, you said the birds here don't sing, they scream in agony. But you've spent a lot of time in the jungle.
Sure, yes.
I mean, how do you feel about the jungle?
Well,
or jungles, right?
I say it also in some written texts in my book, Conquest of the Useless.
Uh-huh.
And at some point I'm saying I love the jungle, yet against my better knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But you see, you cannot take it completely out of context. When Les Blanc was filming me, it was right after we had 2 plane crashes, 2 small aircraft that brought provisions and extras to us. We have just had our camp for 800 people in the jungle burned down. We ran into a border war between Peru and Ecuador. And my leading character became so ill that we had to fly him back out to the United States, and his doctors wouldn't allow him to return. Then there was an attack of a tribal group far, far up in the mountains that had suffered from the drought. There was the driest dry season in recorded history, in memory. And they had wandered down with a drying river in search, apparently, of turtle eggs. And they clashed with 3 people, local people, Machigenga, native tribal people, who had been fishing for us and looking for turtle eggs. And they shot them in the dark of the night, and the man was shot through his throat and had also a deflected arrow at his shin, and a woman shot by 3 arrows into her body, very close, a cluster of 3 arrows. And and we had to operate them on the kitchen table. They would have died if we had tried to transport them. And I was, with mosquito repellent, spraying away the cloud of mosquitoes, and with the other hand a torchlight illuminating the operation. And all this happens on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then Les Blanc says, let's speak about the jungle. So in a way,
that was the frame of mind in which you approached that answer. Yeah.
And the frame of mind should be mentioned at least. Otherwise, it sounds like a crazy statement. It was a very natural statement.
When I describe that movie to people, I describe it probably the way many people do, where it's the story of a rubber baron trying to move a boat from one drainage to the next, and it's just this impossible task.
It's a huge steamboat over a mountain.
Yeah, and so what you do in the movie, which sounds funny in this age of special effects and CGI, what the movie does the making of the movie does the exact insane thing that is portrayed as an insane thing in the movie.
No, I do not agree. It's not insane.
Okay.
It is, number one, I knew it was doable and I did it. And it is not insane because it's a big metaphor, somehow dormant in us. So big, like, let's say, Don Quixote tackling with his lance the windmills. It's something described, of course, by Cervantes, and we know, that's somehow in us. It's a metaphor, or Moby Dick, the hunt for the white whale. Mm-hmm. Things like that. And I knew a ship pulled over a mountain by force of human strength and turnstiles and coiling up ropes, and I would move it over a mountain. It's a big metaphor, not insanity, because it's deep inside of us. And it has something that I could articulate and others couldn't. But since I articulate it, we have a metaphor, one more of the metaphors that are probably dormant in many of us. Absolutely not insanity. Clinically sane, so to speak, what I did.
I stand corrected.
And at the time, of course, there was no digital effect. It was done in 1981.
You had to do it. You had to do it the way you did it.
No, not necessarily, because 20th Century Fox at the time wanted to produce a film. However, only with a miniature plastic replica and what they called in a good jungle. And they meant the Botanic Garden in San Diego. And I asked them, gentlemen, what's the bad jungle then? And then it became frosty, and I knew I was alone. And I had to do it alone. I was also the producer of the film. And so I don't want to miss this work.
How do you look at, with all the movies you made, over 60 movies, and how many books? You've done a dozen books?
No, it's probably 80 movies by now.
And a dozen books or so? Or?
Yeah, in poetry. And I just finished yet another book. You have to take it seriously that I am deeply inside convinced that the written stuff, the prose, the poetry, has a more direct impact. Something, and it's not the events. You see, in my memoirs, if you look after event, yes, of course there are wild events, but it's a style, it's a prose. That's what makes the book.
Oh, I mean, I mean, I don't know, like, far be it from me to feel the need to tell you this, but I mean, you're a phenomenal writer. And in reading your book, I had said to Corinne, our producer, I had said I had kind of given up on literary memoirs in exchange for memoirs, autobiographies of people who have a story to tell, right? And this book, but this book is those
the story, the way you
yeah, but this book is a combination of those
yeah.
two things.
Yeah.
I mean, this book is of a high literary merit, like you know, as a writer, as a person who loves the language, it's of high literary merit, but also does that heavy lifting of telling a story that really ought to be told.
Yeah.
Which is how you came to view the world the way you do and produce the work that you did. But I have two last questions. With all that work, how do you gauge which are your favorites? Like, which are the ones you shouldn't have done? What are you glad you did?
Oh, you can stop right away.
Yeah.
I love them all.
You do?
I truly love them all, and they're all good. They're all good.
There's no one you wish you could put back in the box.
No, for God's sake, never. Only over my dead body.
Yeah.
I would allow you to put it away and put it back. But you have to be aware that, of course, I'm critical as well. And I see mistakes. Yes, I do see mistakes. And I see how I evolved as a kid who made films, because I made my first film at the age of 19.
You made your first phone call at 17.
That's true.
And
yes,
made your
nobody
first
will
film
believe
at
it.
19.
Yes, nobody nowadays believes it. Everybody with their cell phones and applications. So I literally made my first phone call at age 17. Yes, all these films, I see mistake here, mistake there, but I accept them. I can live with it. And it's the same way like with a mother. You do not ask the mother, you have 5 children here, which is your favorite? And you know who the favorites are. My favorites are all the children that have the worst defects. The child that has squint eyes, the child that has a stutter, the child that has a limp. And I would be, as a mother, the lioness to help them, defend them, make them proud, shine as great and wonderful as I can shine.
You mentioned a minute ago, you said over my dead body. Let's move on to your dead body for a minute. What? I have no idea what you'd say to this. What do you hope and fear about what's going to happen to you when you die? Like, what do you entertain an idea?
No, I won't be around anymore. I always said posterity doesn't interest me because I won't be around there anyway. However,
but like, what I mean, do you picture? What is your idea? I don't want to get like terribly personal in the way it's uncomfortable. Yeah. What is your idea of an afterlife?
I think it's highly likely that there's no afterlife.
So your posterity, like, you don't care about that, and then it's just...
I won't be around. Yeah. However, I did something which was not in my catalog of behavior and thinking, and my brothers and my wife Lena convinced me. There are 80 films, negatives, mixes, tens of thousands of photos, manuscripts, you just name it, documents. It should be somehow preserved, and I started a non-profit foundation, which has oversight of the state of Bavaria, where all the rights of all my films, of everything I've created, went in.
To go to Bavaria?
Well, because my culture is Bavarian. And
but I feel like you owe that. I feel like you owe that to America.
No, because you do not see where I come from. English was only my 4th or 5th language.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's the language you work in, though.
it doesn't matter. It's I would not write a novel like The Twilight World in English. I write it in German, and it's translated. And
your new book was translated.
Sure,
I forgot about
yes,
that.
and
Yeah.
very well. The best translator, arguably from German into English, has done it. Michael Hoffman. It's in German prose.
Yeah, but you have zero problem communicating in English.
Yes, but I do not write poetry in English. You can only do it in your mother tongue. But let me go back to the afterlife. Yes, my work will have afterlife because it's owned now by a foundation, by a non-profit foundation. In other words, if I become impoverished tomorrow, I cannot sell the catalog of my films to Turner Classics, or you just name it, because I do not own them anymore.
You're protecting yourself from yourself.
No, I don't need protection against myself. I understand that, and I was clearly told, sat down at a table by my wife, and she said to me, "You think your films are your property. Yes, many of them that I produced and wrote and directed, technically, legally, they are my property. But you know what? You really do not own them. The people own it. The people, the audiences out there, they own it. They own the books. They own your prose. They own your poetry. They own your memoirs." So, and I'm completely at ease with that, and let life go on. I won't be around.
Yeah.
And that's totally and absolutely fine, because we are made, and all biological life is made like that. I'm totally at ease.
I lied because I got one last question for you.
Okay.
I haven't gotten to the end of Every Man for Himself and God Against All, your new memoir. Do you, this will be for my kids. Do you, in the end of that book, get into acting in The Mandalorian? Or is that not addressed in the memoir?
I believe I'm addressing it, but briefly.
Yeah.
But the end, it has a very, very strange end that you will never see anywhere in world literature. And it has to do with something the Japanese soldier Hiro Onoda, who fought the Second World War 29 years still after the end of the war in the jungle in the Philippines. And he had survived 111 ambushes and being fired at. And he says to me, because we were discussing time, does present time exist, and is there only past and future? And present time is a fiction, which actually is. And he says, but sometimes you can see the future, because one day a bullet was fired at him and the sun very low, and he sees the bullet coming right at him. And with the sun, it has this orange copper kind of glow. And he knows it will kill him. And he only had time to rotate his body to the side, and it whizzed by his body. And I was writing on my last chapter. I knew it was going to be the last chapter, the absence of images, the absence of the human race on this planet, maybe 200,000 years in the future. And I was typing at a window, it was out there, and all of a sudden I have this sensation a bullet is coming at me, because I saw in somehow I sensed something golden and greenish iridescent came shooting towards me. And I look up, but it was not a bullet, it was a hummingbird. Sometimes they shoot straight like that. And I looked at my text, and the moment I had reached, I thought, I shouldn't write any more word. And the text stops in mid-sentence. The entire book stops in mid-sentence.
And that's it?
That's it.
Did you get a lot of pushback from an editor?
No, they loved it.
That's
and audiences, those who read it, you will see when you finish reading the memoirs, you will like it, I guess.
All right. So thank you very much for joining us. Check out Werner
Thank you
Herzog.
for your patience.
Well, check out all of his movies, and especially check out Every Man for Himself and God Against All by Werner Herzog. And then do yourself a favor and watch Happy People.
Yes, they're highly advisable.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.